Hello and welcome to episode 231 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is May 17th, 2024. But this video will be released next Monday, which I think is May 20th, so that I'm in my usual rhythm of releasing a video on Monday. The reason I'm recording it a bit early is because I've been on holiday, so I've lots of things to show, and it means I'll have Monday off next Monday. So, and today also there's quite a long list of things I'm not going to show you. Those are the projects that I left at home, and I'll mostly only show you the projects that I had with me on holiday. But before I come to those, let's talk about what I'm wearing. And I'm wearing my double knitted Remember Cowl by Nathan Taylor, the Sockmatician. And I thought this way is a nice way to wear this, to have a warm neck and also show both sides of the cowl. But I'll take it off now. Last time I showed it to you about 3 weeks ago. It was a finished project, but I hadn't washed it yet. And I tried to show you that the knitting wasn't all that regular because it hadn't been washed yet, and it's still not perfect. So there's still some stitches like here that are a bit bigger than the others, but that's okay. It's not machine knit. It can show you that it was hand knit, but I think on the whole, if you have a look at it, it looks a lot neater than it looked last time I showed it to you, and that's what washing does to your knitting. Once the yarn gets wet, all the fibers sort of relax and they realize the way they're supposed to sit now. It's hard to explain, but I think most of you will have made have had the experience that once you wash your knitting, everything looks a bit nicer than it did before. And sometimes it looks a lot nicer, especially if you block things, which I certainly did not do with this cowl. It's not a lace pattern, it didn't need blocking. So all I did is I washed it, I laid it flat to dry. I kept turning it. I don't really think it would have gotten a crease at the side if I had left it lying, but I wanted to dry quickly, so I kept moving it so that the part that was on the bottom would come up and get more air, and then I turned it inside out. All the things you do when you want something to dry a little more quickly. And because it's a double layer all around, and then when you lay it down, it's sort of like 4 layers on top of each other, it took a bit longer to dry. Yeah, but it's dry now. I love it. I'm absolutely happy with how it turned out. The yarn is a mix of alpaca and silk by Hansa Farm. It's a beautiful yarn. It's so nice to touch. It was fantastic to knit with, and I love wearing it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to wearing this a whole lot. Yeah, so that's the Remember Cowl. And I paired it with this pullover that I haven't worn on the video in a very long time. It's the project page on Ravelry is from 2011, but I must have knit it before. It was when I started using Ravelry more, I started adding things that I had knit before. So I don't really know exactly when I knitted this pullover, and it's my own design. The yarn is called Hauswolle. It's a fairly rustic yarn by Wollerödel. I'm not quite sure whether it's a pure wool or whether it has some acrylic mixed in with it. But as I said, it's a bit thicker, it's rather rustic, and I wanted to pair this yarn with a lace pattern. So I picked this lace pattern that I think was supposed to be a tablecloth or something like that, and I knit 6 squares. I knit 6 squares that looked all the same. It's really difficult to show the pattern off in the dark yarn, but I think you can sort of see the lace pattern. Maybe this way is a bit better. Anyway, so I knitted 6 squares. I seamed them together using the Kitchener stitch, so you can't really see the seam, and it's the same front and back from the knitting. I knit a tiny bit of ribbing at the sleeves. I knit a bit longer ribbing on the lower end of my front and back, and then for the neckline, all I did is I folded a bit of the square inside. I folded less at the back and a little more in the front. And because of the pattern, it has this nice shape at the neckline, which I think is quite funny. And yeah, so it's a bit of an unusual construction, but since I've knitted the pullover, I've seen this sort of pullover where you have like one width for the sleeves and the front and back, and then just a bit of ribbing at the lower edge. I've seen it several times, and I think it's quite funny. It's a bit difficult to wear a jacket on top, but for a weather like now, where it's sort of in between seasons, it's not really cold, it's not really warm yet, I quite like it. And because it's black, I thought it worked really well with my new cowl. And yeah, and there are many ways you can wear this. So if I fold it inside, I can just show one side if I want to, or I could only show the other side, depending on whether I wanted to show more of the red or more of the black. Or you can just fold a little, and then you have both sides showing. And yeah, and you can choose whether you have more flowers or fewer flowers. So even if I wanted to wear it as a black cowl, it would probably work. It's probably hard to hide all the flowers, but I think you could hide most of the flowers. Like so. Anyway, yeah, I really like it a lot. And I think I prefer to show both sides somehow. I mean, if you do a double knitted something, it's just more fun to show off both sides. So I think I'll wear it like this for today. Yeah, so much to what I'm wearing. Then on to finished objects. I have 2 finished objects. I have 2 new cast-ons. So sort of stays the same, which is still too much, but it's just so difficult to finish more than cast on. There's so many things that need to be cast on. Anyway, my older finished object is the Mystery Gnome by Sarah Shearer. I think it's the 14th Mystery Gnome that she designed and that I knit, because I've knit all of her Mystery Gnomes. I've not knit all of the other gnomes that she's designed, but most of them. So that was Nimble, and the pattern is called Gnome News is Good News. And the last clue appeared, or I received the last clue on the day before I went on holiday, and I had too much to do with packing and stuff. I did not manage to finish Nimble, but that's the first thing I did after I got back. And now Nimble is finished, and I don't think he's a mystery anymore, so I think I can just show him. And I love Nimble. I love the yarn that I picked that has these rainbow colors. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And from the pattern, what you can do is you can sew the hand and the hat together as if he was holding on to the end of his hat. And then this arm, sort of by accident, ended up here, and I thought this looks like there was a strong wind and he's holding on to his hat, and I really love it. But I did not sew the arms this way. So this is still a loose, and also this hand. So I did not sew it on. I just put it there for fun. I put a little button there just with the rainbow, because of the rainbow colors. And yeah, the interesting thing about Nimble is really that he's knit sideways. So if you use self-striping yarn the way I did, the stripes will not be bigger on top and thinner where he's wider, but because of the short rows, they sort of stay the same. Now with my yarn that I used, I started somewhere around here. Again, this is Kitchener Stitch, so I can't see. And then I went through all the colors once, and then the first set of colors repeated. So if I had put him together the way I knit him, the beard should have been here, but I didn't want all the blue to be hidden. And also I liked to have the front here, so you can sort of see all the colors at one glance. And when I knit the arms, I knit one arm from one end of my ball of yarn and the other arm from the other end, and it just happened to fit exactly with the colors that I had at the sides. For the feet, there were several options. I could have knit the feet sort of this way onto the body. So it would look as if he was sitting with his feet in front and you could look at the sole of the foot. That was quite funny, but I preferred Nimble to be standing. So I sewed the feet on so that the garter bit was on top, where it's a bit wider, and I knit the flatter bit to the bottom. Oh, by the way, I used the contrast color for the bottom bit. I think the pattern says to use the main color, but I wanted to save that for something else. So I decided to use just the contrast color, and you can't see it anyway as long as he's standing. Yeah, so that's Nimble, the latest mystery gnome by Sarah Schura. And I was a bit wondering last year that there were fewer mystery gnomes than usual. And but I thought maybe, I don't know what she was doing. I was quite sure she was up to something. And now we know what she was up to. She wrote a book about gnomes. So now people who do not like to buy patterns online, they can go ahead and order the book. It's not out yet, I think, but you can already order it. And I think it's going to be published in September. I'm not quite sure. I've ordered it. I ordered the German version, so it would be easier for my German customers to read the book. And yeah, and I'm waiting for it to come. And then there'll be a lot more gnomes in my life and on my podcast. Yeah, so that's Nimble, my first finished object for today. And the second finished object is also a new cast on. And that's, of course, the next Sock Madness socks. So the pattern, the next round started while I was on holiday. I brought enough yarn to knit the socks, and I started knitting the Bibliophiles Mark sock by Cynthia Hüttner. And this is basically what the sock looks like. Yeah, this was my first sock, and I knit the first sock, and when I finished it, maybe I'd already started the second one, I don't know, all the spots on my team were filled, so I knew I wasn't going to go on to the next round, which was absolutely okay with me, and that's why I did not finish them properly. So, so this is supposed to look like a bookmark, and you were supposed to knit a tab hanging down here in the same color, and then the 4 beads were supposed to hang on strands at the lower end of this bookmark. And I decided not to do that, but because I did want to use the beads, I just decided to sew them on the top of the bookmark. And the pattern that you see here is not a complete garter stripe, but it's just some purl stitches and then interrupted by a knit stitch. And we were supposed to knit in some text. So all the purl stitches represent letters of a word, and the knit stitches are the space in between the words. And we could pick whatever text we wanted. And I chose Psalm 100 from the Bible. It's one of the texts that I love to sing. And I used an English version for my first sock, and I used the German version for the second sock, and I had music playing in my head all the time I was knitting these socks. Yeah, I used a solid color so that the purl stitches would be more visible, but I used a colorful yarn, multicolor yarn for the bookmark. And I finished the socks, so I got the bonus pattern, which I haven't started yet, but I would love to. Yeah, and these are the round 5 socks of the Sock Madness this year. The round 6 has already started. It's probably almost finished as well. Those are very nice socks out of 4 different colors. I am thinking of knitting the pattern using 2 colors, but I'm thinking of using a self-striping yarn for one of the colors and a contrast color for the other color. And then they should be very colorful as well and have an interesting effect. I just didn't have time to pick yarn yet. And I'm not really supposed to cast on new projects, so maybe I have to finish 1 or 2 projects before I start those socks. So that's all the finished objects for today. Now for the works in progress. The projects that stayed at home when I went on holiday were the children's flax pullover, my Lanatus pullover, with the color work pullover I'm knitting, the crochet summer pullover, my skirt, the Evenstar short skirt, and also the Mamaki dress. Those were the projects that I stayed at home mostly because they were fairly big. Yeah, and I concentrated more on the smaller projects. So the first sock I'm going to show you is another Sock Madness pattern, but it's a bonus pattern. It's the pattern 3 Worlds, and my project is called 2 Worlds because I'm just using 2 colors. So I'm using the Funny Fruits color for the water and the dark gray for the pattern, for the contrast color. And I have decided that my leg part is finished. So I decided only to knit 35 rounds instead of 55 rounds. I know my sister isn't too keen on very long socks, so she was happy, and I was just a bit tired of knitting these many stitches, and so I had to concentrate on every round. You have to count all the time. You have the leatherback jacquard stitches on the inside, so it's a bit tedious to knit this, but it's a very nice pattern, so it's worth it. But I thought 35 rounds is enough. So that's when I decided to put in the heel. I knit the heel as per pattern. It's a very interesting way. She does the heel flap, and then I did the heel turn. I'll take this off to show you. So that was the heel turn. And now I am working 3 different patterns. So there's the pattern on the sole of the heel. It's this with these little squares, and that's where the decreases are happening. The what are they called? Can't think of the word right now, but the decreases that you do, because I have too many stitches now from picking up stitches on the side. Then the sides have this pattern that's supposed to look like fish scales. Is scales the word? I don't know. But these stitches will end up to form the sole of the foot once these stitches have been decreased away. So that's a lot easier to knit, and there's no, there are no leatherback jacquard stitches for the sole stitches. And then on the front of on the top of the foot, on the front of the leg, no, the top of the foot, I still have the leatherback jacquard stitches because most of the stitches are now blue. And with this foot, I'm knitting the fish head, and then the other sock gets the fish body. And I started knitting the fish. I did about 3 stitches. So these 3 stitches are the beginning of the fish head. Very, very interesting. It is quite a lot of work. I have to follow 2 different charts at the moment, but I think it's really worth it, and it's really fun knitting these. I really love the different blue shades, and there are some bits in the yarn that are fairly dark, so the contrast color is sometimes not very strong, but that's exactly what my sister loves. So I'm pretty sure she is going to love those socks whenever they get done. Might probably still take quite a long time, but it doesn't matter. We're going into summer, so she won't need them right now. Okay, the next sock that I worked on during my holiday, I worked on a lot more, are the Bigfoot socks. And these are socks for a friend's husband who has really big feet. So it's European size 48, 49. And I knit most of the sock. I started the toe. And again, I used the 6-ply yarn for the toe. I'm using a 4-ply yarn for the rest of the sock. And I was just not sure whether the size was right. And I'd left the sock blocker at home, so I couldn't try it on. And I was a bit worried it was going to be too big, and it's almost too big. So this is where the sock blocker ends. I haven't finished the toe, but I know that the last few rounds, they mostly just bring it to a close. They don't really add a lot of length. And so I think a tiny bit too big is a lot better than a tiny bit too small. So I'm going to leave it this way. I might give the sock to my friend for her husband to try it on. So in case it is too big, I can make the second one a bit smaller, and I can just undo the toe and take out a few rounds. But for now, this is what I'm going with. here are all my markers that mark every 20 rounds, so it was easier to count, and I'll leave them in as long as I'm knitting the second sock. Yeah, so now that I've got the sock blocker and I'm happy with the size, I'm just quickly going to finish the toe, and then I can start the second sock. So that's it for socks, but I worked a lot also on the leg warmers that I started before my holiday. So the sock and the leg warmer were really the easy portable knitting project. I had a little portable crochet project as well, but that's why they got worked on a whole lot. So the yarn I'm using for the leg warmer is this 6-ply sock yarn by Opal. The series is Paradise. That's why the leg warmers are called Paradise. And I actually finished my first leg warmer. And it turned out really, really long. And I'm very happy with that. I can also wear them as arm warmers. So they are wide enough and long enough to cover my whole arm. So if I'm wearing something without sleeves, I can just use those instead of sleeves. And I think that's quite funny. But if I wear them on my legs, I can cover my whole lower part of my leg. Not quite sure what's that called, but I can sort of bunch it up on my legs, or I can even pull it a bit over my knee. So I think it's a perfect size for leg warmers, and I'm really happy that I persevered to get this whole length. Very often I'm impatient and I finish them earlier. And after I finished the first one, I started the second one, and I've already got this far. With the colors, I tried to get different color edges. So I started this one with gray. I cast off with red, and I started the next one with green. The fourth edge, I'm not going to go for a certain color. I'll just knit the same number of rounds as I had on this one, and it'll be a surprise. If things worked out perfectly, it would be blue, because I think that's the only color that I don't have at an edge at the moment. So we'll see if that works out. And if I'm close with the blue, I could even do 1 or 2 rounds more or less. With this length, nobody would notice. But then nobody's going to notice the color of the edge either, so it doesn't matter. We'll see. Whatever I feel like at the moment. So that's that. Then we come to my new cast on, the other new cast on. So one new cast on was the Sock Madness sock. That's usually a new cast on and a finished object at the same time. But now I started a new garment, even though I didn't finish one. But the reason I had to start this project is I wanted to show you another book. It's another book that was published by Stiebner, and it's another book that they sent me for free to use and to show off on the video. It's called Schwedische Strickjacken für jede Jahreszeit, which means Swedish cardigans for every season. I'm not quite sure whether there's an English version out. There is definitely a Swedish version out. I'm not quite sure about an English version, but if you check the designer Maja Karlsson, I'm sure you can find out. If I find an English version, I'll link it underneath. Otherwise, I'll just link the German book. Now, this book is a fairly big, fairly heavy book, and it's so beautiful. There are 20 cardigans inside. They are listed per season. So for spring and summer, there are 4 cardigans each. And for fall and winter, where we wear more cardigans, there are 6 different patterns each. And the cardigans are beautiful, but the book itself is just a work of art. So it's very well made. It's a very nice sort of materials that they use. And the photography is just so beautiful. And it's not only about the clothes, but it's just about the pictures as well. And sometimes they even have pictures without knitting in them, which I think is very interesting. So here you see several of the projects in the book. And then you have close-ups. I think every cardigan is shown from the front and the back, and very often also from the side. So that's really nice. This is the project that I'm knitting first out of this book. It's a very simple, very easy cardigan, and I wanted to have a beginner-friendly project that I could, that my pupils who learn to knit could start after a fairly short time. So this is one of those pictures with no knitting in them, but it's just a beautiful picture. And this again is the cardigan that I'm knitting. And then yeah, I could show you so many pictures out of this book just because they're so nice. There are several cardigans in one color, like this lacy one and the one that I'm knitting, but there are definitely a lot of projects with color work, and they are always sticked, which I think is a very good idea because it means you can knit everything in the round. Beautiful winter photograph, and this is one of the pullovers, cardigans. Of course, you could knit most of the cardigans or all of the cardigans as pullovers if you just don't stick them. This is one of the projects that's really high on my to-do list. I would love to knit that pattern, and I have already picked out a yarn that I would love to use for that. This is a very nice colorwork cardigan, which I think would really look nice as a pullover as well. So some are a bit more elaborate, some are a lot easier, so they're different levels. This one is one without sleeves. It's probably from the summer, so that's a very nice, I would probably call it vest. This cardigan looks a bit like the one that I'm knitting now, but it's knit out of mohair and not alpaca, and it's also very, very nice. And there's just one more cardigan I want to show you because that's also very simple. So this doesn't have any color work. I don't think it's sticked, but I'm not quite sure. But that would also be rather beginner friendly. I think it's a bit more difficult because you have to button band, where you have to pick up stitches, but not really difficult at all. And the very first one for spring, I'll quickly show you that. That's mostly one color, and the only color work is on the sleeve. So it's a small circumference, it's not very many stitches. So it's a nice spot to try and practice some color work. Now, the cardigan that I am knitting in the book is knit out of one strand of yarn that's fairly thick, and I think it's also brushed alpaca. And I realized that if I use the brushed alpaca by Hansa Farm held double, I get almost the exact same yardage and I can knit it to the same gauge. So I'm using 2 strands of Hansa Farm's brushed alpaca, and I'm knitting with an 8mm needle, and this is what I have so far. It's not a lot. This is the upper part of the back. So the way this cardigan is designed is you knit the upper part of the back, then you pick up a few stitches. Yes, you have to pick up stitches, but not very many, and it's in the same direction that was knit. So you pick up 1 stitch for 1 stitch to knit the front, and then you do that on the other side, and you do some increases. So you have a little V-neck, and then once you have the armhole depth, you take all the stitches together, you knit down, do some ribbing, and then there are stitches being picked up for the sleeve. Okay, more stitches to be picked up, forgot about that. But anyway, it's not difficult, and then the sleeves are knit down, and that's it. There's no finishing, there's no button band, you can't really close the cardigan, but I think that's okay. You can pin it together with something if you want that. You could even add a button band or a shawl collar or something like that. I might do that the second time round I knit the cardigan. I've already planned to knit it twice. But for now, I'm using this yarn and this color. I'm knitting it. I do want to knit it exactly as it's written so that people know what they get if they knit the cardigan exactly the way it's written. And then if some beginners want to try it, they can do it. The cardigan is very oversized, so I decided to knit size S I probably would fit into XS as well. I usually wear M, but that was just too oversized for me. I think this is already rather oversized. So I'm sticking to size S, and yeah, really enjoying this knit at the moment. And it should probably grow fairly quickly with the big needle and everything. So that's the new garment that I cast on. That's, yep, that was the last new cast on. Now for the other projects that you already know. The other project I'm knitting out of the brushed Alpaka by Hansa Farm is the Squiggle and Stripe Shawl by Stephen West. And here I use the yarn, I use only a single strand of yarn, and I had finished this middle part that's knit with 4 different colors, and then on holiday I picked up stitches from the longer side of the middle piece, and then I knit 2 color stripes. So it's the beige. I'm using the same color as in the middle part. In the pattern he uses 2 new colors, but I thought that was just too much, so I'm using the same beige that I had here, but I'm pairing it with the brown. And then once you pick up stitches, you knit these stripes using short rows. So this is going to be the tip of the triangle at the end. So here I'm turning round before I get to the end of the round, and then on this side I increase 1 stitch every 2 rows, and then this is going to be the upper part of the triangle, and this is going to be the tip. And I still have to knit quite a number of rows before this part is finished, and then the last bit is going to be picking up stitches on this small side and then just knit a little, I think it's a little triangle to finish off the shawl. Yeah, really happy with that as well. This doesn't take a lot of concentration. As soon as I picked up the stitches, this was one of the projects that I could sort of just knit without thinking a lot. I just had to pay attention when I went to turn round, and then change color every other row. So that's a Squiggle and Stripe by Stephen West. Then I continued knitting on the Abloom Mystery Knit Along by Susanna IC. By now all the clues have been published and I'm still on clue 1. Because I have to look at the pattern most of the time, and because I decided to do the many beads version, this was not a project that I could just knit and concentrate on something else. So I didn't knit on it that much, but it still grew quite a bit. Not quite sure. I think everybody knows what the first clue looks like by now, so I'll just show it. This is what it looks like. So it's the same pattern that keeps repeating, and then every pattern repeat has a little bead at this point. And I think I'm in chart repeat number 5, I think, maybe 6, and I have to do 8 of them. So this will still grow quite a bit. I've already had a look at clue 2 and I had a look at the way the pattern changes, and there will be more beads in clue 2 than clue 1. And I haven't had a look at 3 and 4 yet. I sort of want to keep it a surprise to myself. I haven't had a look at finished shawls either yet, so I'm trying not to have a look at those as long as I'm knitting on it myself. So that's the Abloom Mystery Knit Along, the Luxury Lace by Woldackel. And now to my crochet project. So every time I go on holiday, I like to pack these 10-gram minis that you can see on the shelf there, and I only use minis that have some green in them, and then I crochet these little 9 round granny squares, and yeah, so this is one of them. With this one I had this much left over. With this one, 10 grams weren't enough to do 9 rounds, so it's quite funny how different the little balls of yarn are. Then with this one, I had a lot left over again with this one as well. By the way, this is the same color that I used as my bookmark in the sock madness socks, which is quite funny. And then with this square, I started crocheting, and then there was a knot in the ball, in the yarn. So I undid the knot, and I thought, well, maybe it's the rest is going to be enough. So I crocheted the rest, and it was not enough. So now I have to finish the round using this yarn, and then I'll have a little bit left over. And then I had two more little balls of yarn, and one of them was this one. And with this one, I tried something different. So if you look at the square very closely, you can see that it's crocheted as a spiral. So this is where I stopped crocheting, but I could just keep going round and round and round. And this is not the end of the round the way it is like with this one. This is where I stopped crocheting, but this is the beginning of the round. So this is not a complete corner, but with this one, this is just the corner I'm working, but all the other corners are complete. And I've always wanted to do that, and I didn't really know how, but now I figured out a way to sort of do something special at the beginning that makes the square look a bit wonky at the beginning, but the more you crochet, the less obvious it is that it's not quite 100% straight. And with this one, I'm trying to incorporate it into my blanket. And to show you the blanket that I have so far, these are all the squares that I've already crocheted at some point and put together in this blanket. And for attaching the squares to the blanket, I always add another round. And while I add the light green round, I crochet the squares together. Now with this square, it's going to be a bit awkward because I do not have a complete corner here, but I will still try and do that just to see how it works, just to see what kind of problems I run into. But the other squares that I'm going to crochet for the blanket, I will do the proper start and end of a round, so it'll be easier to attach them to the blanket. But because I really like the idea of the spiral granny square, whatever, I did another one just to practice the beginning. And for this one, I crocheted the complete 10 grams, and I got almost 10 rounds of granny square. And I am now going to add a big ball of yarn to this, and I will just keep going, and then I will either make a big square that I can fold in half and wear as a triangular shawl, or I can maybe give it away as a baby blanket. I don't know yet, but I want to use more opal yarn that's self-striping, and because I'm crocheting in a spiral, I will never have to interrupt the stripe. So with crocheting the normal rounds, what happens every now and then is that that you crochet with the color in one round, and then the color jumps up into the round above, and it's sort of interrupted. And with the spiral, that doesn't happen. And so this is going to be, let's say this is a gauge swatch at the moment, and as soon as I start the new ball of yarn, this is going to be a new project. It's a trick, I know. But anyway, my crochet, my rules. So, the last project that I'm going to show you is the knit along that we're doing where we knit the hats that have two sides. What are they called? Can't remember right now. And the Haramaki. And I have finally decided that my Haramaki is long enough. So this was the point where I thought it might be the halfway point. I did not knit another 80 rounds. So I did 20, 40, 50, maybe 50 more rounds. And I've tried it on. I decided it's long enough. And then I experimented a little bit with the cast off. And I've now decided to do the cast off only with the gray color that I'm knitting on the inside of the 2-color brioche. And I'm using Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. And I'm adding beads. So it took me a bit to figure out when to add the beads and how to do the bind off. But now the bind off is almost as stretchy as the brioche part. And this is going to be the lower part of the Haramaki. So I can either pull it over my shoulders, I hope, or if I wear it like a skirt, like a short skirt, this is going to be the lower bit so that I can still move my legs. And then the upper part, I am thinking of crocheting something that I can pull a string through so I can pull it tight. So I'll have one end that's as wide as possible, and then the other end I can pull it close, and I can either pull it close around my neck or around my waist, or maybe even around my head if I pull it over like a hood. So that's the plan. So most of the knitting is done, but quite a lot of finishing still to be done. Yeah, so that was quite a lot that I had today. That was most of the things, all of the things that I knit and crochet during the holiday, plus the gnome that I did after I got back. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope next time I'll show you all the other projects again so they won't be forgotten. And I'll see you in the next one.